Not only the fact that I owe more than I can pay, and that I can bless the saints, and I'm called to obey the Lord, and I'm accountable to my spiritual leaders, but fifthly, another motive to forgiveness is the recognition that I am not alone, but I am a part of a fellowship. I am not alone, I am a part of a fellowship. Verses 23 and 24. Wonderful statement Paul makes here. Again, he's got the pen in his hand, and he writes, Epaphras, my fellow prisoner in Christ Jesus, greets you, as do Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, Luke, my fellow workers. He identifies Epaphras as a fellow prisoner. He identifies Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, Luke as fellow workers. 5 men. 5 men precious to Paul. 5 men precious to Philemon. 5 men Philemon knows, 5 men who know Philemon. What's he saying? He's saying you can't act independently of the fellowship. You don't act alone. If you don't forgive, you will fracture the love bond that exists between these men and you. You will violate their expectations of you. You will set a bad example for them. You can't do just what you want to do as if you existed alone. You not only have a level of accountability to one who is your spiritual leader, but you have a level of responsibility to set the standard for those who are your spiritual friends. 5 men. They send her greetings, Philemon. They have high expectations of you. These men are also mentioned in Colossians 4. Look at Colossians 4, because the verses there in Colossians 4 will give us some insight into these 5 men. Obviously, Tychicus, who carried the letter to the Colossian church, could give his own greetings. He also would be known to Philemon, most likely. But then the list starts with Epaphras in Philemon. Epaphras is mentioned down in Colossians 4:12. Epaphras, who is one of your number, a bondslave of Jesus Christ, sends you his greetings, always laboring earnestly for you in his prayers, that you may stand perfect and fully assured in all the will of God. For I bear him witness that he has a deep concern for you and for those who are in Laodicea and Hierapolis. Epaphras, named first, probably was converted under Paul. He is most likely the founder of the Colossian church and the other 2 churches in the Lycus Valley. There were 3 altogether, namely Laodicea and Hierapolis. Probably Epaphras had founded those 3 churches. He was himself from Colossae, certainly well known to Philemon. He, being described here as one of your number, was still associated, of course, with the church meeting in the house of Philemon. He is a bond slave of Jesus Christ, which speaks of his deep commitment to service. He is a man of prayer, laboring earnestly, constantly praying for the perfection of the saints, that they would be fully assured that they are in the midst of the will of God. He carries a deep pastoral concern for the Colossian church, the Laodicean church, the church at Hierapolis. This is a remarkable and wonderful godly man. In chapter 1 of Colossians and verse 7, he is called our beloved fellow bond servant, who is a faithful servant of Christ on our behalf, and also informed us of your love in the Spirit. Epaphras is a noble Christian. He's the best, godly, committed, prayerful, serving. And then in Philemon, he is called my fellow prisoner in Christ Jesus. Now, we don't know whether that means that he had become also a prisoner of Rome, or whether he had simply identified with Paul's imprisonment to the point that he took on a self-imposed imprisonment and stood alongside Paul in his chains. He was either a captive or he was a willing prisoner for Paul's sake. The second name in the list is the name of Mark. He's mentioned in Colossians 4:10 as the cousin of Barnabas. And the Colossian church is told that if he comes, they're to welcome him. Here we find out that he's the cousin of Barnabas, which may explain something of the conflict in Acts 15. You remember when Paul and Barnabas were going on their journey, John Mark had come along, only he was weak and didn't like the difficulty. And you remember he wanted out, and so Paul said, that's enough of him, get rid of him. If he's not strong enough for the deal, get rid of him. Barnabas took up his defense, and you remember there was a parting of the ways of Paul and Barnabas. This explains maybe why Barnabas had such an attachment to Mark. They were cousins. Mark, by the way, was much improved by this time. Through that strong discipline from Paul, he was taught a great lesson. Probably under very strong influence from Peter. 1 Peter 5:13 may indicate that. And then under the tutelage of Barnabas himself, Mark had come full circle to spiritual strength. Mark became such a wonderful man that in 2 Timothy 4:11, when Paul was at the end of his life and wrote to Timothy, he said, send me Mark, because he's so useful. So here is a godly man, Mark. The third one mentioned in Philemon is Aristarchus. He also is mentioned in Colossians 4:10. Here it says, Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner. He is not called a fellow prisoner in Philemon, but a fellow worker. So it may be, again, that he was a fellow prisoner by choice, not by law, that he was simply willingly attached to the imprisonment of Paul to assist and help Paul. Aristarchus was associated with the city of Thessalonica, according to Acts 20, verse 14. He was with Paul at Ephesus during his third journey and his long stay of several years there. He was even captured by the Ephesian rioters in Acts 19:29, and he was with Paul on the voyage in Acts 27. Here he is with him, sharing this time of imprisonment, perhaps willingly putting himself in bondage to serve Paul. He is known and beloved by Paul, and obviously known and beloved by Philemon. The next name is that infamous name of Demas. Demas is also mentioned in Colossians chapter 4, verse 14. Simply his name, Demas. We don't know much about Demas.